Welcome to the 2020 Boston Marathon Expo seminar series. I'm Roger Robinson, convener of the panel on late life running and whole life running. Special thanks to TK Skandarian of Conventures for convening this series of virtual seminars, helping us all to get through the current crisis and celebrate the Boston Marathon, enjoy our running despite the global virus situation. So here's wishing, first of all, and most importantly, a really great run to all of you who are running the virtual Boston Marathon this week, or whenever you do it. Final thanks also on this session to my technical minder and good angel, Rosie Spraker. This session, late life running and whole life running, may sound as if it's for older runners, but in fact it's specially designed for all runners who are growing older. And since you're all, and we're all, 1 minute approximately older than we were when I said welcome, that welcome applies to everybody, to all runners and all who might be interested in this topic. Our panel is deeply expert in that topic and in many different ways. Jonathan Beverly is author of a book exactly on our topic, Run Strong, Stay Hungry, 9 Keys to Staying in the Race, keeping on running, as well as being editor of the excellent, highly recommended Podium Running online running site, formerly editor of Running Times, assistant editor of Runner's World, and currently having the best year for a while as a runner, so I believe. Gail Kislovich has also written a book directly on our topic, Running Past 50, Advice and Inspiration for Senior Runners, as well as 6 other running titles, from first marathons to the new Runspirations. Gail is widely published as a journalist, has had a column in Runner's World, and is with New York Roadrunners. Mary McManus, with a distinguished career in social work, ran the 2009 Boston Marathon at age 55. And that sounds a fairly routine kind of statement, but in Mary's case, it isn't, as she will explain to us, and as she has chronicled in the Adventures of Runner Girl 1953, her book. Bennett Beach is a living legend of whole life running. You couldn't get it better. He's completed 52 consecutive Boston marathons, running every year without a break since 1968. He'll tell us about number 53, the virtual. I don't know the answer to that one yet. Ben is a writer and editor and has also run every Cherry Blossom 10 miles race in Washington, D.C. And I'm Roger Robinson, in front of the field in the sense that I'm now in my 69th year of running, which is more than most of them are old, in 1 year of which in Boston, I did set a Boston Marathon Masters record. So I have that credential. I coach also a group of eager, improving American runners with an average age of 77. And I wrote a key chapter on late life running in my book, When Running Made History. Those are very brief bios. Let's hear more. To warm up, I've asked each of the panelists simply to talk about themselves, especially as older or lifelong runners, and as experts in late life and whole life running. We're going to start with Jonathan Beverly.
Thank you, Roger. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So I'm Jonathan Beverly. I'm 56 years old and been running since 1977. So I guess that's about 43 years now. So I consider myself just beginning in this area of late life running. But about 3 years ago, realizing that I was beginning this part of my life, I began looking at those who successfully have navigated through the years, that are still running at 50, 60, 70, 80, and not only running, but chasing it, competing and enjoying it, and still hungry. And I wanted to be that. So I had these friends. Like Roger Robinson, who you just met, who's been excellent at every decade, and even up to now in his 80s. I'll let him introduce himself, but he inspired me. John Benoit Samuelson, who everyone knows won Olympic gold in her prime, and then now is setting goals like running a sub 3-hour marathon at 60. Or some that more of my talent ability. Have never been anywhere near that caliber. But like Robin Emery, who's actually inspired John Bonet Samuelson, who's from a small town in Maine, started running in 1967, and is still at 70, doing her 5-mile loop and running races every weekend around Maine and loving it. So I interviewed these people. I ended up with 51 of them and distilled out 9 principles to how do you do this? How do you stay strong and you stay hungry for all these years? 3 of them are about the physiological factors, training, and 6 of them are more the psychological, because that's what everybody wanted to talk about. It's much more about how do you stay hungry than it is how do you stay healthy to be able to run late. And what I found was this remarkable group of people that these principles are all interconnected, that these people they're humble, they're hungry, they're in touch with their bodies, they're adaptable, they're honest, and yet eternally hopeful. And these people greatly influenced me, and it was an inspiring project, and I feel set to go ahead into later life now.
That's great. You met some interesting people. Gail, you go next.
All right. Hi there, everybody, and my distinguished panel members. This is so much fun. My story is a little different. I am a very long time late life runner. I started running when I was 16 years old in 1967, a time when females weren't allowed to do anything. There were no sports, certainly not track or cross country. I mean, maybe I could have been a cheerleader, but that was not for me. So I was one of those kids who, if you told me I couldn't do something, I was going to do it. And I was very, very inspired by my 2 older brothers who ran track and cross country. And I would watch them run through the woods and run along the beach. And it just was such freedom to me. And I wanted that. I wanted to have that feeling. So one night, I put on my Keds and I took the family dog and we went out under cover of darkness. And I ran around the block, maybe half a mile, and I came back absolutely transformed. I was exhilarated, I loved it, and I never stopped. And interestingly enough, Roger, that was the same year that Catherine was almost thrown off the Boston Marathon course for the crime of being female. So it was a great beginning for me that year and for Catherine. And for 53 years now, running has been my best friend, my passion, my therapy, and my religion. And I feel so blessed to have that in my life. As you said, Roger, I had a great career at Runner's World with a column, and I got to interview, all the celebrity runners, but also the back of the packers. And their stories to me were just as interesting. And at New York Road Runners, I was a marathon coach and also wrote about their youth running programs. And I got to see firsthand how running changed the lives of these underserved kids and underserved communities. So that was a real treat for me. I'm lucky to have running in my life. I've met incredible people. I've traveled the world running in very remote areas. Last year, I was lucky enough to get my Abbott World Major medal in Tokyo, and thank goodness it was last year, not this year, or I'd still be chasing that medal. And now, approaching 69, I kind of just wish I could skip over that and turn 70 because I'd be entering a new age group. Not that there are races, but they will come back. And interestingly enough, with running past 50, I was inspired to write this book 2 years ago when I was training for a marathon and I got a really bad hamstring pull. So I went to a sports medicine doctor who was younger than me. And after telling my story and he's looking at my chart, he looked at me and he said, at your age, you shouldn't be running marathons. It took everything I could from, not just attacking him right then there. I kind of sat back and I took a deep breath and I said, how dare you? you know nothing about me except an age on a chart. Many women my age are running marathons, and they're running them up into their 80s. So with that, I sort of hobbled out of his office, and I went home and I started doing my research and wrote this book. And I interviewed a lot of people from 50 to 100 who are out there running marathons and ultras and loving every minute of it. And their stories just were very inspiring for me. And I think that they just tell us that we, all these late lifetime runners, that we are the ones that we're changing the face and the attitude of aging in our society. We're showing that we can change that. We're not going to sit in a rocking chair. We're going to go out there. We're going to keep running marathons forever. That's my story.
That's a great one. I love the phrase that you put in early when you just simply said, "I never stopped," which probably describes most of us, most of those people who Jonathan interviewed, who were the whole life runners. It just never occurred to any of us, why should we stop? You know, we're enjoying this. It's good. There's no reason to stop. Ben, you're next. 52 Boston marathons, and is the 53rd coming up?
Correct. I was quite sure as a young child that I was going to be the shortstop for the Milwaukee Braves someday. That came crashing down by the time I was cut from JV baseball in high school. And if you could see me, if we were in the Heinz Convention Center, you could see that I'm really not cut out to be a baseball, football, or basketball player as I had hoped to be. So I started dabbling in running and discovered that, in fact, I could do that. And as a high school senior, I just stumbled upon a radio broadcast of the marathon. It was a rainy, cold day. And I thought, boy, that is a crazy thing, 26 miles in that weather. And I was going to be in Boston at school the next year. And I said, well, I think I'll run the Boston Marathon. In those days, you didn't have to qualify. You just had to show up. You had to enter. And Jock Semple, who was in charge, tried to discourage people like me who really had no credentials. But generally, he would let you in. So I started training and basically was training for a month or so. And I figured I'd just add a mile a day that last month till I got to 26, and I'd be ready. So 2 days before the race, which was then on a Friday, then it was always the 19th, whatever day of the week it was. So Wednesday, 17th, I ran 20 miles, which I'd never done before. And then 2 days later, showed up for the race. You know, I ate steak and eggs that morning. I thought that was the right thing to eat. And on the bus ride on the way out, I heard all these guys talking about their training. I said, holy smokes, what have I gotten myself into? I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And you get out there, and there's a gym, the Hopkins Junior High School gym, and the doctor puts a stethoscope on your chest to see if you're qualified to run. And I think all of us were. And we're all changing in the gym. You know, there are no women around in those days. I guess there was one. So I ran it. I just wanted to finish. And I ended up running 3:23. And I was ecstatic. That was your Amby Burfoot one. It was a hot day. When I finished, you know, we ran to the Prudential. There was beef stew. There were showers in the bottom of the Prudential. I said, all right, I've done it. That's it, which is probably not unusual reaction, with no idea that I would still be there 50 years later doing it. And so it's been wonderful. I've been lucky. The injuries have not interfered with me on that day. I've had a supportive wife whom I met running. Friends and family have encouraged me all along the way. And so now I did have a bump in the road. I'd run 2:27 3 times up there and was excited about each new age group. But then in my early 50s, I got this thing called dystonia, which is a movement disorder. And my brain apparently sends a signal to my left hamstring when I want to extend my left leg to contract instead of extend. I thought my running career was over, but my body's adapted. I'm a pathetic sight to watch. You don't want to see me running, in quotes. But anyway, I've just sort of kept at it, and I run. It takes me twice as long to get through it now, but I sort of can't stop doing it. So that's basically my story of stubbornness.
Yeah, there are certain themes coming through, and talking stubbornness and persistence and overcoming bumps in the road. Mary McManus, tell us your story.
Thank you, Roger, and it is so great to be here. So I'm a very unlikely runner. Actually, Dave McGilvery calls me a most unlikely runner who stood next to him at the starting line of the 2009 Boston Marathon when he gave the oral command for the mobility impaired runners to start on their journey from Hopkinton to Boston. So at the age of 5, I contracted paralytic polio in the last polio epidemic in the States in 1959. And I was paralyzed initially from the neck down. And then I got movement back on my right side. My left side took a very long time to come back. I was in a long leg brace. And so you can imagine that sports and athletics really had no part in my life. In addition to that, I grew up in a family where there was substance abuse, so there was a lot of violence. So my body literally took quite a beating, and I honed my intellectual prowess, and I had a stellar career as a social worker at the VA. And interestingly enough, I was at the top of my game as an award-winning social worker when my life came to a screeching halt. And I was diagnosed with post-polio syndrome, which Western medicine calls a progressive neuromuscular disease. So I did what I'd done throughout my life. When I faced my challenges, I got still, and I asked for divine guidance, and I prayed. And this is where the story gets really interesting, because the answer came in the form of a poem. And the title of the poem was called Running the Race. And I'll just share with you one of the stanzas. Using wheelchair to travel set limits on what I could do, resulted in joy to realize I could live life anew. I celebrated my body, creaks, groans, and need for a brace, while in my mind I focused on winning a 10K race. And I thought to myself, good God, literally, why am I writing about running a race? I was sitting in a leg brace. I had a toe-up leg brace. I had a cane. I had difficulty swallowing, breathing. I was told, as I said, they said I'd spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair. And I was truly a physical wreck. And I thought, this is really strange. Well, I started writing poetry. And through my poetry, in my mind's eye, I was seeing myself dancing, running whole, being free. My leg brace came off. I went through Spalding outpatient rehabilitation. And then later that year, I met a personal trainer. And I asked her, I said, gee, do you think there's anything we can do that maybe, I could come out of my leg brace and at least not be as deconditioned as I am? At 53 years old, you want to be able to get off a low toilet seat and not need assistance. So she said, well, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right, quoting Henry Ford. And we got to work together. So after 6 months, she said to me, well, you're doing so much better. I'd reached my goals. And she said, what are your next goals? And I said, I want to come out of my leg brace. I want to walk outside. I want to feel free in my body. And all this time I'm writing poetry, imagining myself doing these things. And she gathered up her things. She was getting ready to leave. And I said, wait, I have one more goal. And she said, oh, what's that? And I said, I want to run the 2009 Boston Marathon. I want to do it for Spalding. They have a race for rehab team. And I want to do it next year. And she was an earth angel. And she said, well, you're going to need a pair of running shoes. And so she sent me to Marathon Sports. And I started running. And I'd never run a day in my life. I absolutely fell in love with the sport. And for the first time in my life, my maiden name was Alper. I was no longer easy out Alper. I was celebrated. And even when I crossed the finish line last, you would have thought I broke the finisher's tape because people just really embraced my story. And that's what this wonderful community is like. And so on April 20th of 2009, it took me and my husband and daughter by my side 7 hours and 49 minutes to go from Hopkinton to Boston, hence the early start. And there I am with my medal and my daughter. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, yes.
And since then, I've been running and not stopping. I'm now 66 years old, and I'm so blessed to have had so many adventures. Throughout the years, I've had a couple of injuries, and the doctor said, you should never have started running in the first place. But I continued to harness the power of the mind-body connection, visualization, chiropractic, and I'm continuing to run strong.
That's really great. It's interesting, the theme that and Jonathan said this up front, and so did Gail, that in a way society is not ready for what we're doing, but we're making it ready. As Gail said, we're actually breaking these barriers, and we're redefining old age for society. And we're fortunate in having modern medicine, which enables us to do things. But it is a very important progress that we're making for society. And we're having to defy all these prejudices. And I don't think I've had people actually try and, yes, I have. I've had people try and stop me and deter me. What most happens at my age is when I'm running hard, and of course I puff and gasp just like I always did, just like I've done since I was 13 years old. People these days get concerned. Young runners around me will say, "Are you all right, sir?" They say. The sir bit always annoys me. But I want to say, yes, I've been doing this for 60 years. I've been sounding like this for 60 years, and I'm still claiming the right to run hard just as I always did. My story, because I'm part of the panel as well as convening it, is in a way I was lucky in three ways. One, I had not much talent as a young runner, which meant I had to keep persisting, and I improved slowly. I was a slow developer. So I didn't get to a good level of running, to international level, until I was 26, and then kept that going and ran internationally through first for England and then for New Zealand through to 37. So that was late. And then the second way in which I was lucky is that just when I was running still well at that level at 37, 38, masters running was just getting established. And historically, I was very lucky, because back in the 1960s, say, just as there was nothing for women, there was nothing for older runners. Well, then the age groups were beginning to be defined. And I think it was both Gail and Ben both said how, certainly Ben, how we look forward to the next age group. Well, we're very unusual among aging people in that we're looking forward to the next birthday as a new frontier, as a new opportunity, as something where we can find, again, a kind of success that hasn't been available to us for the last 2 or 3 years. So we have that positive view. And I suppose, so when I was master, that meant that all kinds of things were available that hadn't been available 10 years earlier. Like I was able to win win world championships. I was able to win the New York City Marathon. I've got proof of it, which I'll hold. You may not be able to read it, but what it actually says is New York City Marathon, 1980, first place. So I show that to all my guests. And I don't know what Alberto Salazar got that day, whether he got one that said first geriatric, I don't know. But that's his problem. I've got this one that says New York City Marathon, first place, and I'm hanging on to that. So that meant a lot at 40. And then going through and doing things at 50 as well. And as Jonathan said, having those new new incentives, those new targets, and those new rewards at each age has been tremendously satisfying. And the third way in which I think I've been lucky is that I think Ben said he was very stubborn, and so am I. I guess we all are. We don't stop. And I've continued through injuries and aging and 2 knee replacements. I've continued stubbornly to think of myself and define myself as a runner. Not only that, I mean, I've got other things in my life, but that's one way in which I continue to define myself. And Jonathan's term was in his book title and in a series of columns that I wrote for him on Podium Runner recently, is still hungry. And I think that just gets it. It's not desperately hungry, but we still enjoy the meal, and we still look forward, and we still sort of yeah. There's still that. It's not exactly ambition. It's just a desire to keep on living fully. So that takes us forward, I think. Let's now do what a lot of people will be looking for, which is actual practical advice. You know, we've got a group of people here who've gone through this range of experiences and a range of expertise. And among us, we've also talked to kind of every great older runner on the planet, I would think, between us. So we've got a lot of wisdom to bring forward. So let's hear now some practical advice. And I think on this one, we're starting with Mary. Mary, give our viewers, you know, how do you do it? A good tip.
One of the things that I've noticed is over the past 13 years is that I set goals that challenge me, but that don't frustrate me, that I will work toward and work hard, and that really keeps my love of the sport going. I've also, I think it's been a challenge for all of us during this pandemic to find ways to stay motivated. So we've gotten very creative. We found all these new routes in our neighborhood that we'd never run before. We're also doing virtual races because that's a great way to keep the motivation flowing and also to stay connected to the running community during this time. But I'd say a single most important piece of advice is keep your joy of running alive, however that manifests for you. For me, I love finding different routes. I set different goals each month for myself of what I want to do. And that really keeps the running fresh. And I also remember every day that I get out there, how grateful I am for this gift in my life.
That's great. Ben, you go next.
Well, to keep myself moving in old age, I run only every other day, and I don't run very far. Part of that is this dystonia that I mentioned before because my gait is so awkward. I stretch a lot. I cross-train. Running is probably about 15% of the exercise I get. I do 2 workouts most days. It might be biking, swimming, elliptical trainer, a rowing machine I've got, weightlifting. And that variety adds some spice. I stretch a lot. I warm up before I go out, probably 20 minutes. And I try not to run through an injury. So those are probably things all runners have heard. And for me, they seem to be working. And so those are my thoughts.
Great. Thank you, Ben. And all very valuable. Gail, tell us yours.
All right. Well, the first thing we have to realize as late life runners is that we're not immortal anymore. We're not those young Turks out there who are coming over to you and saying, "You all right, sir?" That's not us anymore. And we have to respect that. Like Ben said, don't run through an injury. It's not worth it because we don't rebound as fast as we used to. I'm sort of dealing with that right now and trying to get into my head. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's tough, but you know, we have to. Longer recovery times after a long run. I'm beginning to realize the beauty of a nap. You know, that's something I never would have thought of before.
Oh, wait a few years.
And cross training. If you can get into a pool and do some pool jogging, that's incredible therapy if you're injured or even if you're not injured. And also balance. As we get older, balance becomes really key because you do not want to fall out there. So what I do at night is when I brush my teeth, I'll just stand on one leg and I'll brush my teeth on one leg. My husband looks at me like I'm kind of weird, but that's all right. It helps with the balance. And a day off. I know, you know, some of you who have been running forever, you know, hitting 150 miles a week. We're not going to do that anymore. A day off really is key. It's kind of part of the training to take that day off. And I think the most important thing we should do when we're out there is run with a smile. Make everyone see that we do enjoy this gift called running.
All of those are great. And I suspect we're now going to get into a different dimension, certainly when you get to me. But Jonathan, tell us yours.
Well, you asked me to think about one thing most important, and one thing always echoes what everyone else said, and that is to be adaptable. We have to adapt our goals, as Mary said. It's different. It's different for every month, even what we can accomplish, what's motivating, and every element of training, from volume to intensity to particularly density. How often do you do workouts? Then to do this, first we have to be really in touch with our body and honest. And I think this, again, Gail hinted at this too, that I used to be able to ignore a lot of things and say, oh yeah, well, my knee hurts, but it'll be better tomorrow. Well, my knee hurt from March through May, and now I've got a brace for a couple months because I'm 56. So you have to be brutally honest and in touch. But even more than that is we need to have emotional agility, which is a psychological term saying separate emotion from the numbers, from the reality out there. It's really easy to get ourselves tied in, those of us who run for a lifetime, to say, well, if I can't, do a 7-minute mile, it's not worth doing it. That goes out the window really quickly if you're going to keep going. Or, why bother training if I'm not getting at least 35, 40 miles a week? Or all these things that are emotionally attached to it. So you can see it that way, or you can use the term, I quoted V.S. Naipaul in my book. It says, you need to learn to trample on the past. To be a successful lifetime runner, you need to learn to trample on the past, which sounds harsh and negative, but what it does is it frees you up to then look forward to the future and be in the present.
That's absolutely right. And looking to the future is what I was talking about with the age groups. We always are, despite the fact that we know that we're slowing down. I'm going to take a slightly different position from most. Given Gail's absolutely right about taking rest, and Ben about taking the day off, and Jonathan about the density that you talked about. But I've continued, for whatever stubborn reasons, to want to compete as well as I can. And when I was writing those columns for Jonathan recently, it was in a way, it was a kind of 4-month experiment. And the conclusion I got to is that you can actually still train with the same mixture of intense effort as when you were younger. The mantra that I use for myself and for the other older guys who I coach is you can do a 25-year-old's training if you take a 75-year-old's recovery. And that means instead of, what used to be the hard, easy principle that was well established in coaching a few years ago, one hard day, then an easy day, then a hard day. So that has become hard, easy, 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 easy. One hard day and at least 4 then recovery days, and then I can do a hard day, a long run, and I still, for whatever weird masochistic reason, still like doing the interval training. Well, I know the reason. The reason that I do that kind of training, the long run plus the interval, is that it makes me better. It makes my times faster. It always has. It did when I was 15, and it does now I'm 81. So I still continue to do that. Illogical though it might be, or I do resist the people who look at us and say, like Gail's doctor, you shouldn't be doing this. You're too old for it. It doesn't look good, and you shouldn't stress your body at this age. Take it gently. I say that's exactly what people said to women in the 1960s. It doesn't look good, and you're putting your body under stress, which is harmful. Prove it. I don't know that stress is harmful. Every time I go to the doctor, I come out with blood tests and everything else that show that actually I'm about 35 years old. The joints and everything else are older, and my performance is older, and so on and so on. But in general health, I have no doubt that running hard has been beneficial to me, just as it's beneficial in terms of running better. So those are my sort of basic principles. I still like working hard, and I don't see any reason. I'm not going to have anybody tell me because you're over 80 you shouldn't undertake physical effort. Why not? I think the human body is built for physical effort. It thrives on it, and I will persist in doing it, however much I break down. Given everything you're right about, looking after injuries and taking the days off, and that recovery factor is very important. Where I used to do intervals with, say, 2 minutes between them, now I take whatever I feel like between them, 5 minutes, 6 minutes. I don't care. I wait till I'm ready and then go again. So the recovery, that 75-year-old's recovery, is built in both on the day and between the days. So those are our pragmatic answers or suggestions. And now we've already touched on what you might call the philosophical. Again, let everybody tell, what is your motivation? What is your motivation and your reward? What you might call your personal or spiritual reasons for doing this activity. And here I think we're getting into some really important things in terms of how older people can see themselves. Who are we starting with? I think Ben first on this one, the philosophy. What's kept you going over 53 Boston marathons and despite a supposedly debilitating illness?
Well, spiritual is a word I can't really deal with very well here, Rogers. But I think running has just become part of who I am, what I do. And when you've been doing something for half a century, it's hard to stop, even when you look as pathetic as I do out there. And, you know, I love to eat. And so I'm always thinking about how good that bowl of cereal is going to taste when I get back home. And so it's stubbornness that I alluded to earlier that is part of it. And I'm sure that there are members of my family who would just as soon I give up on the marathon, though they are not pushing me, but they probably think it's a little nutty for me to be out there at this age. But I can't help myself. When those birds migrate in the spring, I'm off to Hopkinton. That's just sort of the way that works out for me. And we'll just see how it goes. It's 1 year at a time.
It's when they bring the swan boats out onto Boston Common, then Ben's off to Hopkinton. That's it. All part of the Boston scene. Gail, I think you're next on this one.
Yes. So when I finished running past 50 and I talked to all these amazing, incredible people, I did have a chapter called Lessons Learned, because what are we doing this for? What are we out there for? And I just wanted to read one or two things. Overall, what came across loud and clear is that running is a gift to all of us, and it needs to be nurtured and it needs to be treasured. Everyone wants to run forever, to pursue endless miles until we can't. So never disrespect your running or take it for granted. And then one of my must reads for everybody, if you haven't, is Haruki Murakami in his What I Talk About When I Talk About Running. And he has a line that says, cherish the time you have with your running, nurture your running, and in turn, it will take care of you. And then another one, never give a thought to your age or how you should behave. So those are all the philosophical reasons that we keep running. As we have to remember not to take our running for granted, and we have to take ourselves not for granted. We also have to realize that what we want to achieve and what we can achieve might not always mesh, and that's okay. You know, go for an age division, still go for a PR, but you know, you can't look back. As we've all said, you need to look forward with our running. And that's another reason you mentioned Runspirations. So Andy Burford, I'm very lucky to have him as a running partner. We just wrote Runspirations. And it came on a run when we were running, and you know, here we are. I've been running 53 miles and whatever ages, and so is he. And sometimes we have trouble getting out the door. It's like, oh, I have to run again. Like, I'll be all dressed and I'll say, oh, you know, I think I'll put a load of wash in, or, oh, I'm going to need to do this, or, oh, got to pee again. So what is that? What takes us forever to get out? So we wrote this book, and it's got all sorts of motivational quotes in it and fantastic stories. So Andy and I we have our favorite motivations. A little different. His is, it's a little humor. These are quotes. My grandmother started walking 5 miles a day when she was 60. She's now 97, and we don't know where she is. That's Ellen DeGeneres. But mine, which really does sum up the philosophical view of aging, is you are never too old to set another goal or to dream another dream. And that's C.S. Lewis. And I think that's kind of the mantra we all live by now.
That's a wonderful one. I'll come back to that, but I think first we hear from Jonathan.
So why is it worth being a runner? I would say it's because it allows me to be human and alive. And to me, that's a lot more than just having my heart beating and breathing in and out. But it means I'm choosing and acting and setting goals and working towards them. I think we all this year started to realize how important races were. I would have said, in fact, we talked about that in Run Strong, Stay Hungry. Is racing more important or is running more important? And the answer for these people is yes. Yes, the two. The two are totally intertwined, because racing is that chance to look forward. And then, my personal experience was I suddenly realized I had to have a goal. And so Roger and I set some, we both were setting goals. We set a time trial goal. I ran a time trial and said, okay, can I lower it from 22 something minutes to 20 something for a 5K? And suddenly I was doing workouts and pushing myself and seeing progress and feeling good about that progress, experiencing flow, which is, Roger says, I can't write something without mentioning Csikszentmihalyi Mihai, who talked about flow, which is when you have built a skill and then you use it such that you're totally focused on that and you feel this moment of mastery and release and time falls away and you are engaged and you are human, you're alive at that time. Running does that better than anything I know in life. And in life, I don't feel like I would be fully human, fully acting without choosing in some way. And running gives me that.
Absolutely. Mary.
Well, I believe that most runners would say that running is so much more than physical exercise. And for me, I had a very deep spiritual call to the sport. First, when I wrote that poem that really just flowed out of me, and then when I had that conversation with my personal trainer, that goal of running the Boston Marathon came from deep within my soul. It's certainly not something I thought about, because obviously what rational person says, I've never run a day in my life, so I'm going to run the Boston Marathon. It was a very deep soul calling. And once I started running, it was such a profound experience. I was transformed, and Gail mentioned about transformation. I felt as though I had been a victim of polio, post-polio, of all kinds of abuse. And when I started running, I suddenly felt free in my body. I felt like all the shackles of my past just fell away. And I love Helen Keller's quote, which is, life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. And that's why I started running, and that's what keeps me going running. In The Adventures of Runner Girl, I talk about how in 2014 I had a very serious knee injury. My left knee blew out. And the doctors told me, see, you never should have started running in the first place as a polio survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to stop running. And I found a wonderful chiropractor, and I went back to my whole mind-body connection, and we healed the left knee without surgery. And I went on to run 3 Bermuda half marathons. It was on my bucket list to run Bermuda after I was 60, and then it fell off my bucket list. But after the knee injury, I got inspired to do it. So in The Adventures of Runner Girl, not only do I talk about my Boston Marathon, but how I wasn't a one-hit wonder and went on to run the 3 Bermuda half marathons. And I just absolutely love the sport. I love how I feel when I'm out on the roads and also being in nature. It's incredible. And I don't run with music. I run to the soundtrack of nature and just feel that it, as Gail said, it's such a gift and a blessing.
I love that you brought that in at the end, Mary, because that's the same for me. I can't imagine. I mean, I know I'm fortunate in living in places where I don't have to train through an American winter, but I can't imagine running indoors on a treadmill. It's a kind of contradiction in terms. Running for me is being outside, not having headphones, listening to the birds, listening to the movement of the wind, and being there and interacting with the earth. And that's part of what I suppose is my basic philosophy is I've always, right through life, I've always wanted a balanced life. I chose the life of a scholar and an academic, a life of teaching and books and working with words. And I balanced that all through by also being a runner. And I've always felt, as Jonathan said, that's made me more fully human. But the other thing about being older, I've reached the conclusion that the great secret to having a good old age is to find something at which you're improving. Now, I know you're not absolutely improving. I'm perfectly well aware of the fact that, when I absolutely was ecstatic to run a 25-minute 5K. But when I was 25, I would have been astonished that anybody could take running 25 minutes seriously for a 5K. Well aware of that. But nevertheless, for me, in a post-knee replacement phase, this was a very significant improvement. And charting improvement over this year, as I went from 30 minutes to 28 to 27 and so on, was as almost as, I won't say as satisfying, almost as satisfying as anything I've done in my whole running career. It won't match, winning a Boston Marathon Masters or something like that, of course, but nevertheless, at this age, it's a sense of actually making progress and therefore having something positive, and not just seeing old age as that inevitable process of decline, which is what it is, I'm afraid, for most people. So whatever the activity is, find something in which you can improve, not relative to how you were when you were 25, but relative to how you were 4 months ago, or last week, or whatever. Just chart the progress. And then we're getting towards the end. We have about 3 or 4 minutes left. My suggestion to people was that we might say, we're not running, what I just said, we're not running as fast now as when we were 25. Does it matter? But let's ask each of the panelists to say just one quick last word that they want to leave with people from their experience about running for your whole life and running in your later life. Jonathan, would you like to start us off?
So let me answer that question that you asked. Does it matter that I can't run as fast as I could when I'm 25? And of course it does. It sucks. But does it change? Does it change how I feel about running and motivating running? Absolutely not, because it was always arbitrary. If I was honest about it, I once ran a 2:46 marathon, which is 46 minutes slower than Kipchoge and faster than a lot of other people. But doesn't it matter? It's totally arbitrary. But what's important is that it took me 18 years to get from 3:23. I ran the same, at 16, I ran the same time as Ben did in his first at 16 years old. But it took me 18 years to master that. And the progress of that is what mattered. And as Roger just so eloquently pointed out, that's exactly what's the same now. It's a question of, can I see progress? Can I see mastery? Can I put everything together in one day to do the best I can with what I am now?
Mary, last word.
Last word is, you're never too old to start running.
Good. That's a great last. Absolutely true. Very quickly, my wife, Catherine Switzer, got back into marathon running because she was meeting so many older women who'd started when they were 60 and 70. And she got jealous. So she decided to get back into it herself. Ben, a last word.
Well, I think just being grateful that we're still out there. I will sort of shake my head when I see people pushing double strollers going by me and all sorts of other, and I look at my watch, say, God, am I walking or running? And I'll say, well, I'm still at it, and I should be grateful for that, because a lot of people are not.
Yes, indeed. Gail, your last word.
All right. So the beauty about running is no matter what age you are, running turns us all into kids again. I mean, come on, tell me, who doesn't run through a puddle when you see one? Who doesn't want to run when you see the first snowfall? It's the beauty of running, and it doesn't matter if you're 25 or 95. We'll all be out there running and enjoying it. It doesn't matter if we're fast anymore. You just have to be the best you can at any age. It's great if we won at one point in time, but you know what? Throw off the watch and just enjoy it now.
Thank you, and thank you all. And my last word is that, as I think we've been showing, running, sure, Gail's absolutely right. It's something that brings out the child in us, but it's also something which is a really interesting subject. It's an important part of the human capacity. We've evolved as runners. It's something which is fundamental, which has all these intellectual and call it spiritual or personal elements to it. It's something which is always worth thinking about, always worth talking about, always worth reading about. And there's some really good books that have been produced by this panel. Please buy them, please read them, please enjoy them. Those of you like Ben who are running this year's virtual Boston Marathon, we virtually wish you every success and satisfaction to all of you. Thank you all, and thank you again to Conventures for hosting these seminars. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Roger.
Bye.